you can stand proud knowing that the armed forces that you pass on is one that is formidable and empowered. Be assured that as you leave military service, you have inspired others with work and have set an edifying example for the entire institution. Last week, I signed Executive Order number 70, creating the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. From the military-centric approach that gave us our recent successes against the communist movement, we now shift to a new civilian-led approach that will tap other government agencies and other private sector in bringing basic services and other development interventions that will address the root cause of the communist movement. General Madrigal, you are now tasked with the responsibility of preserving peace and ensuring order as we shift to this new approach. Sustain the progress of those who came before you and create a legacy that will cause ripples for positive change in the years to come. As we trudge the noble path of realizing lasting peace and sustainable development in our country, I trust that under General Benjamin Madrigal's leadership, the AFP will achieve more milestones in the campaign to combat terrorism, to end insurgency, and address lingering and emerging threats to national security. The Filipino people count on the AFP to remain steadfast in its mission to defend our land and preserve the peace in our communities. Let us not fail them. As I have done in my part to ensure the welfare and well-being of our troops, including their immediate families, I now ask our men and women in uniform to support the leadership of General Madrigal so that we soon realize our aspiration for a stronger armed forces and a safer and more secure nation. Congratulations to General Galvez, General Madrigal, at mabuhay ang sandatang lakas ng Pilipinas.
Thank you very much to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. A memento will be presented to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte by the new Chief of Staff Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr.
Sampanaw!
The guests may be seated.
Stop!
Once again, the guests may be seated. The memento, the micro-etched Aguinaldo framed glass, hereby presented to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, President of the Republic of the Philippines and Commander-in-Chief Armed Forces of the Philippines, in grateful appreciation of the President and Commander-in-Chief's untiring and relentless effort in pursuing the modernization of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and unflinching commitment in constantly uplifting the morale of the soldiers, airmen, sailors, marines, civilian human resource, and reservists. It depicts the Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, which houses the General Headquarters of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, named after Filipino hero and revolutionary leader. Thank you very much. We shall now proceed with the passing review.
Balik ko na, sa malikod ko. Cut! Masa... Proceed! Takanang balikat! Ha! Talupad! Unang talupad! Pasulong! Cut! Hit sa kaliwa! Cut!
We'd like to request General Galvez, sir, to proceed down the grandstand for the final review.
Today, this cliche is the following is what everybody feels as we bid farewell to yet another military leader whose contribution and role in the armed forces have been a vital one. General Carlito Quansing Galvez Jr.
As General Galvez relinquished his post, he is assured that his successor, Lieutenant General Benjamin Armadrigal Jr., will continue what he had worked on and even make the armed forces of the Philippines soar towards greater achievements.
To our honoree General Galvez, sir, the officers, men and women, and civilian personnel of the Armed Forces of the Philippines proudly wish you all the best. Congratulations, more power, and Godspeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the various contingents of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, ang mga makabagong katipunero, makadiyos, makakalikasan, makatao, at makabansa.
Leading the parading contingent is Major General Pelayo R. Valenzuela, his staff, Colonels Vicente Naldoza, Jose Richie Pabilonia, Dennis Perez, and Lawrence Carrion, Captain Richard David, and Colonel Simplicius Alice.
Following is the AFP Composite Band under the baton of Sergeant Emmanuel de Taza.
The 1st Brigade is headed by Commodore Ray de la Cruz. His staff, Commanders Victor Ramos and Teodoro Bolaño, Lieutenant Colonels Ronaldo Zaragoza, Ferdinand Encomienda, Lebrito Olmoguez, and Cyril Dawati.
Approaching is the 1st Battalion of the Philippine Military Academy and is being led by Cadet First Class Vincent Sistoso, his staff Cadet First Class Clark Jefferson Madara, Kenneth Castillo, Carl Brian Maro, and J.V. Lagasca. For the year 2018, the Philippine Military Academy had recognized the need to conduct a strategy refresh, which produced the PMA Transformation Roadmap 2028.
Following is the Army contingent under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Jamal Bonza. His staff, Captain Edward Ian de Cablanca, First Lieutenant Jaime Serna III Jose Martin Nuas, and Arturo Medina Jr. The Philippine Army has embarked on a transformation program that placed emphasis in a change in paradigm, the Army Transformation Roadmap 2028, which received various recognition. The Gold Trailblazer Award in 2014, Island of Good Governance in 2015, and the Palladium Balance Scorecard Hall of Fame 2018.
The protectors of the Philippine seas and the first line of defense to uphold our territorial integrity, the Philippine Navy. The battalion is under Commander Gabriel Ataiza, his staff, Lieutenant Commanders Johan Scorzada, Jaire Castillo, Juan Carrion, and Joseph Lauron. In 2006, the Philippine Navy embraced good governance when it adopted the Performance Governance System in crafting its Sail Plan 2020. The Navy had come a long way since it began its transformation. After 11 years of working towards its goal, they have reaped what they have sown.
Now we have the Angels of Mercy and the Guardians of the Philippine Skies. The Air Force Battalion led by Lieutenant Colonel Rene Sevilla. His staff, Majors Neil de la Cruz, Albert Estidelia, Virgo Figueroa, and Adrian Ferrer. Time and again, the Philippine Air Force has proven to be a potent military force, primarily for the protection of the Filipino people and country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The audience is requested to stand for the passing of the colors. You may be seated as soon as the colors have passed. Thank you.
National colors are carried by the cadets from the Philippine Military Academy with the major service colors and general headquarters.
The 2nd Brigade is commanded by Brigadier General Leonard Agustin. His staff Lieutenant Colonels Marcelo Alday, Darwin Katibog, Henry Makatangay, Dino Hudson Aznar, and Danilo Facundo.
Following is the Philippine Army Special Operations Forces under Lieutenant Colonel Garcicio San Jose Jr., his staff Majors Francis Tupas, Alberto Balagbat, and First Lieutenant Randy Panghal, and Major Odilon Barrientos. Are formerly under the Philippine Army Special Operations Command, the Philippine Army Special Operations Forces distinguished themselves during the siege of Marawi, which eventually paved way for the conceptualization, creation, activation of the AFP Special Operations Command.
Before you now is the Philippine Marine Corps Battalion headed by Lieutenant Colonel Romel Bognalbal. His staff Majors Glenn Llorito, Miguel Perez, Romulo Dacanay, and Ronald Haguna. A specially trained fighting unit of the Navy. Designed for rapid deployment, the Philippine Marines conduct amphibious and special operations in all kinds of terrain and in any weather condition. The Marines are known for their fighting qualities, endurance, and combat effectiveness. The few, the proud, the Philippine Marines.
Following next is the battalion from the 17th Special Operations Wing of the Philippine Air Force, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel of Major Patrimonios Cesar Olmilla, Captains June Endaya, Ryan Pulmano, Richie Guerra, and Elmer Barcenas. The 17th Special Operations Wing conducts special operations for the defense of the Air Force's bases and installation, and perform their role during surface strike operations as the Philippine Forward Air Controllers, or PFAC. Their transformation towards achieving an effective surface strike capability is stipulated in Philippine Air Force Plan Velocity Book 1. Train hard, fight to win. That is the 17th Special Operations Wing.
Trailing behind is the Armed Forces of the Philippines Reserve Component Units under Lieutenant Colonel William Cruzana. His staff, Major Nardo Zambales, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Fudutan, Lieutenant Commander Roger Torres, and Major Manuel Rasio Escaron. The AFP Reserve components are the standby operational reserve forces ready to fight when they are needed. They were tested lately during the siege in Marawi. Moreover, to attain a credible defense posture, the AFP develops operational ready reserve units which can be mobilized, utilized during wartime, national emergency, and peacetime.
You have just seen a segment of your armed forces pass before you. They represent our brothers and sisters out there in the field, defending our freedom and independence, as well as our democratic institutions.
The Troop Commander Major General Pelayo R. Valenzuela will now report the termination of the ceremony.
Ginoo, tapos na po ang parangal.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again a big hand for General Carlito Guansing Galvez Jr. We would like to remind everyone to please remain where you are until the President has left the grandstand.